Welcome to the Sci-Fi Evolution channel. The Galactic Concorde of intelligent beings existed 15,000 years before the arrival of Earthlings on the interstellar arena. The Earthlings arrived with the innocence of a child discovering his reflection, with a cacophony of noise, boundless enthusiasm, and a complete lack of understanding of what they saw. Concorde itself was located in an architectural marvel, a massive orbital station surrounding a perfectly ordinary star in the Vega system. The symbolism was not overlooked by anyone. Centrality without privilege, balance without bias, and equality without exception. At least, that was the official version in the pamphlets distributed to tourists and new diplomatic representatives. The reality, like most things related to politics and smug creatures in expensive outfits, was much more complicated. Another request from Earthlings to expand mining rights in the Andromeda Nebula, Supreme Counselor Zarn, the being, sighed. The crystalline structures that make up their bodies refract light into patterns that serve as their equivalent of facial expressions. Currently, these patterns express a deep sense of disappointment. This is the fourth time that Deputy Secretary Worth's jelly-like form has responded with what can be interpreted as fun. Their persistence is truly amazing. I appreciate a well-seasoned fermentation culture, but my feelings towards Earthlings are quite different. The two officials glided down a large corridor leading to the main assembly hall, where representatives of more than 300 species gathered to discuss issues of galactic significance, or more precisely, to engage in the art of incredibly complicating simple issues through the application of procedural precedents and minor grievances stretching back thousands of years. Humanity has been a part of this venerable body for exactly 45 standard years. Diplomatically, this made them practically embryos. They were like distant relatives who show up at family gatherings uninvited and immediately start suggesting improvements to traditions they barely understand. The Terran delegation occupied a modest office in what was diplomatically called the New Interests Wing, but was more commonly known as the Noisy Neighbors Corner. Their main representative was a being who called himself Ambassador Dax, although the nature of this title or designation was unclear to many species. Ambassador Dax was currently engaged in what Earthlings call coffee, but which most other species recognize as the voluntary consumption of mild poison for the purpose of stimulation. This practice has earned Earthlings a reputation for consuming recreational toxins, which confuses and worries many Concorde members. The ambassador from Alpha Centauri has again filed an official complaint regarding the voice communication of your staff. The ambassador's assistant, a recent graduate of the diplomatic faculty, still believes in the power of reasonable dialogue. Are they complaining about us again? Dax, engrossed in his report, a detailed analysis of the resource allocation in the Perseus arm that most species find incredibly boring, seemed to be reading with as much enthusiasm as one might reserve for illegal entertainment. They specifically mentioned the barking vocalizations that upset the mental balance during yesterday's reception. Dax finally looked up after taking a sip of coffee. Tell them that we are working on adjusting our expressions of joy to accommodate their sensitive nature. Use those exact words. The assistant grimaced. Sir, the translation software is not perfect. I know exactly what they will do. They're like children. This exchange is a reflection of Earthlings' diplomatic practices, illustrating exactly why older species find Earthlings so confusing. They seem to be deliberately provoking while pursuing serious diplomatic goals. They present carefully researched sentences with one hand, and with the other they make what they call jokes. This cognitive dissonance caused more than one Methuselah to lose his composure for a moment. The current diplomatic incident, which will eventually reveal the true nature of Earthlings to the galaxy, began with something completely trivial. In this case, a disagreement over seating at the upcoming Harmony 500th anniversary gala. Absolutely unacceptable! hissed the representative of the alien meritocracy, his forked tongue darting rapidly in excitement. "The Terran delegation cannot be stationed in Sector 9. The pheromones they emit will spoil our taste throughout the event. Perhaps it would be preferable to place the serpentines in the service corridors," Ambassador Dax suggested, his smile revealing too many teeth. "I've heard that it's the perfect temperature for cold-blooded discussions." The gala's organizing committee, consisting of 7 species chosen for their legendary patience and diplomatic tact, collectively showed signs of extreme stress. Cubulin's representative was actively shedding his skin. "If I may," interjected the Arcturian mediator, whose species evolved specifically to detect and relieve tension between other life forms, "perhaps we could consider a compromise that takes into account both biological needs and diplomatic considerations." Meanwhile, in the service corridors that Ambassador Dax mentioned, a much more important conversation was taking place. The boss nodded. "Great. The ambassador will announce our findings at a meeting of the Security Council tomorrow. The timing should perfectly match the coordinated raids." This operation was carefully planned and flawlessly executed, carried out completely without the knowledge of the vaunted Galactic Concorde security apparatus. It was the culmination of months of Earth exploration work. The purpose of the criminal organization was a multi-species entity engaged in the illegal trade of technology, endangered biological materials, and intelligent beings. The paradox of the situation was that the Earthlings used disagreements about seating arrangements as a cover for such a large-scale operation. It was exactly what Earthlings found funny, but other species would find terrifying. The galactic community considers Earthlings to be persistent, noisy, and lacking in diplomatic tact. However, they fundamentally misinterpreted the nature of the problem. They perceive diplomatic awkwardness as a source of entertainment, but in fact it is a serious problem. They overlooked the cultural error of insisting on drinking caffeine in public. The next day, when Ambassador Dax was preparing his notes for a meeting of the Security Council, his assistant approached him with the news. "Sir, we have just received news that the Ophidians have officially requested your suspension from the Harmony Gala." Dax looked up, a wide smile spreading across his face. "The perfect time. Prepare our response, but do not send it before the council meeting. I suspect that priorities may change dramatically by then." The assistant nodded uncertainly, still mastering the intricacies of earthly diplomatic practice. The response should be a gracious acceptance of their concerns, a sincere apology for any misunderstandings, and a heartfelt expression of hope for continued cooperation on issues of mutual interest. Dax's smile remained unchanged. "After all, we're here to be good neighbors." As he gathered his thoughts, the materials were prepared and ready to unleash a storm of chaos on the criminal organization that had evaded Concorde's justice for decades. Ambassador Dax hummed a cheerful tune as the galaxy was about to learn something fundamental about Earthlings. They were going to find out, in addition to their strange customs and confusing diplomatic approaches, what happens when a top predator stops pretending. The Galactic Concorde Security Council consisted of representatives from 9 of the most militarily significant powers, plus 2 rotating members chosen by lot, a system designed to create an appearance of egalitarianism while ensuring that those with the biggest guns remained in power. Democracy in space turned out to be surprisingly similar to democracy on Earth, a beautiful ideal, often spoiled by practical considerations. Earthlings got their place thanks to the diplomatic corps. In official terms, this is called rapid infrastructure development, but in reality, it was the fastest military expansion in the history of the galaxy. This has caused considerable concern among the established powers, but since Earthlings have so far limited themselves to defensive demonstrations and escorting humanitarian missions, anxiety has gradually given way to a kind of condescending acceptance. "Ambassador Dax, you have requested an urgent opportunity to speak. You're addressing High Marshal Kulgan of the Valtar Dominion," a species that evolved from top predators and still retains the sharp intensity of its ancestors. The Council recognizes the presence of a representative of Terra, Dax, who stands in his immaculately tailored suit, which Earthlings insist on wearing despite having more comfortable and advanced clothing. The terrestrial obsession with clothing remains a source of perplexity for most species. The representative began his speech with the practiced rhythm of an experienced diplomat. I stand before you today with information of great importance to all law-abiding citizens of our galactic community. This was followed by a masterclass in controlled disclosure, and with meticulous precision, Dax presented evidence of a criminal network that was being monitored by Earth's intelligence services. Financial records, shipping invoices, video surveillance recordings, and intercepted messages. The presentation was comprehensive, professional, and absolutely incriminating. In conclusion, Dax said, after 30 minutes of increasingly disturbing revelations, we have identified key figures in this organization, their main locations, and their immediate expansion plans. Terra is ready to help bring these criminals to justice. The council hall was plunged into deafening silence. The skin of the Methuselah representative turned pale blue, which was a sign of extreme shock. Their posture, the feathers of the High Marshal Valtar stood on end, which indicated an increased state of vigilance. The crystalline form of Supreme Advisor Zixtra has darkened significantly. Ambassador Dax, are you informing this council that Earth's intelligence services have conducted unauthorized operations in several jurisdictions without informing the Directorate of Security? Dax's expression remained unchanged. We conducted a thorough investigation using our diplomatic privileges and the freedom of movement granted to all member states. We didn't break any laws. This is unprecedented, hissed the alien representative. The Earthlings have exceeded their authority. Such investigations are the responsibility of the Directorate of Security. The same Directorate of Security that hasn't been able to make any progress against this organization in the last 25 years. Dax's smile was thin. We have achieved in months what you have not been able to achieve in decades. Perhaps instead of, when you doubt our approach, you should also consider your own effectiveness. The hall was filled with a cacophony of sounds, including vocalizations, electromagnetic pulses, and pheromone emissions, similar to a multi-species altercation. That's when the emergency system activated, and red lights flashed along the walls. The AI system announced a security breach and detected unidentified vessels approaching the central platform. Gun signatures were found, and all personnel were ordered to evacuate. The council members immediately put aside their differences. The tactical channel ordered by Supreme Marshal Kulgan appeared on the screen, and the central holographic projector came to life, displaying 15 ships approaching Concorde Station. Their design was unfamiliar, a fusion of different kinds of technology. It was the type of court preferred by those who operate outside the law. A representative of Cubulan said that the defensive systems were activated. His appendages flashed over the control surfaces. However, the response time was slowed down because they somehow compromised our command protocols. How is this possible? Asked Supreme Advisor Zyle. The defensive network is isolated from all external networks. Obviously not isolated enough, Dax replied. He touched his ear, activating a communication device that none of the aliens had noticed. Dax told the vigilant tactician, Situation Alpha, deploy countermeasures and prepare boarding parties. Authorization, Theta 9 Epsilon. The council members looked at him in confusion. Ambassador, Grand Marshal Gran began. What are you doing? The tactical display flashed as 6 new ships suddenly appeared, emerging from FDL travel with incredible precision, positioned between the attackers and the station. The design was unmistakably earthy. Let me introduce 7th Rapid Reaction Fleet, Dax said, his demeanor barely noticeably changed. The slightly awkward diplomat disappeared. In his place was something completely different, a commander, a tactician, a hunter. They were prepared for this scenario, anticipating this attack. The Metanian skin took on a muted purple hue of confusion. Of course, we leaked information about our investigation precisely in order to provoke this reaction. It's much easier to capture them at the scene of a crime than to build a case that would satisfy the legal requirements of Concorde. Dax spoke as if explaining something obvious to a particularly slow child. We needed them to commit an open act of aggression against Concorde itself, which would greatly simplify the legal process. The Council watched in stunned silence as the Terran vessels performed a series of maneuvers that should have been impossible for ships of their size. They moved with coordinated precision, driving attacking vessels like predators. As the conflict progressed, Dax continued to calmly and professionally explain the Earth's strategy. Earthlings have developed larger shields, more powerful weapons, and more advanced detection systems. However, they preferred to maintain control of the battlefield before the first shot was fired. The initial attacking vessel tried to break formation and escape into outer space, but the Earth ship instantly intercepted it. He released what looked like boarding capsules that attached themselves to the ship like parasites. "These are our specialized tactical groups, or Rangers," Dax explained. "They are especially skilled in close combat, a term dating back to the era when Earthlings fought wars on the water." This casual conversation about forced boarding caused a wave of concern among the Council. The Earthlings revealed abilities they had never seen before. The ambassador stated in their official military assessment that High Marshal Kulgan had difficulty maintaining his composure during your actions, which seemed to be aimed at protecting Concorde, and this was a significant violation of military protocol. These operations must be authorized by this council. Dax turned to Marshal Avon, and something in his gaze made the mighty warrior involuntarily retreat. "With all due respect, Marshal, when someone points a gun at your head, protocol becomes a luxury. We acted to save lives." The smile returned, but it no longer reached his eyes. "Isn't that the most important thing? The preservation of life? Sure. Then I'm sure the Council won't have any objections to our methods, as soon as they have time to review the results." As he spoke, he touched his ear again. "Status report." The voice that answered could be heard throughout the hall. "All hostile vessels have been neutralized, sir. Minimal casualties on both sides. We have consolidated control over the systems of the captured, and are now extracting the data." "Well done, Commander. Hold your position and prepare to transfer security." Dax turned to the Council members, who were clearly stunned. "As I said, Terra is ready to help bring these criminals to justice. It looks like this help has already begun." The silence that followed was profound. The galaxy has just witnessed something unexpected. Earthlings act not as diplomatic novices, but as effective, ruthless predators who have manipulated events to their advantage from the very beginning. "I think," said Supreme Counselor Zix, his crystalline form still dark with shock, "the Council will need to reconsider a few assumptions about our Earth colleagues, that's clear." Dax agreed again, the perfect diplomat. "It might be worth offering treats. I understand that these meetings can be exhausting." "It can be quite exhausting," as he offered this perfectly polite diplomatic gesture after an ambush he personally organized. The contrast couldn't be more pronounced. The Supreme Predator bared its teeth, and then immediately returned to its civilized behavior. And that was perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all. The immediate aftermath of what was now called the Security Council incident spread through Galactic Concorde's diplomatic circles with the speed and devastating potential of a quantum cascade failure. Emergency meetings were called, heated discussions broke out, threat assessments were quickly revised, and throughout all this, the Earth delegation maintained an atmosphere of cooperative assistance that somehow managed to be more alarming than outright hostility. 3 days after the incident, the Concorde Executive Committee met for what was officially an information gathering. The meeting, which was essentially a court, but was not called by it, concerned the persons who were being tried. They were not prosecuted for their actions against a criminal organization that had indeed committed heinous crimes. Instead, they were judged for revealing their true nature, which was different from what the galaxy expected. The meeting room was smaller than the main conference hall, able to accommodate a maximum of 20 participants. Today, it was filled with only 12 people. 7 members of the executive committee, 3 expert witnesses, Ambassador Dax, and 2 other Earth representatives. Let's be precise about the events that took place. It all started with the Dorsan technocracy, a being made up of metallic filaments surrounding a plasma core. Dorsans, one of the oldest species in Concorde, viewed other life forms as being in the process of development. Earth's intelligence assets conducted unauthorized activities in sovereign territories and manipulated criminal organizations. Concorde was attacked by a company that deployed military forces without the consent of the Council. The ambassador's demeanor was surprisingly unperturbed, as if he were in the midst of a diplomatic storm. He nodded kindly, although I would argue that the term unauthorized can be interpreted in different ways according to Articles 17 and 29 of the Concorde Charter, which allow member states to conduct investigations related to their own security issues across jurisdictional borders. "We are familiar with the Charter, Ambassador," the Azonic delegate interrupted. "The committee is not concerned about the legality of your actions, but about their consequences." "I'm afraid I don't quite understand," Dax said, looking puzzled. No one in the room was buying it. "Let me be clear." Dorsan's plasma core flared up, which was a sign of growing excitement. "Humanity has turned out to be much more dangerous than previously thought. You have demonstrated abilities beyond what you claimed when you joined Concorde. You have shown an alarming willingness to manipulate events." The ambassador's demeanor changed slightly, his posture straightened, and his head tilted slightly forward. Those who are sensitive to microexpressions immediately recognize the change. "The Earthman wasn't pretending anymore," Dax said, his voice devoid of its usual sweetness. "All the species in this room are descended from predators. The difference is not that Earthlings are predatory by nature. The point is that we have never forgotten our own nature." A wave of unease ran through the room. "Moreover," Dax continued, "I find it curious that we are being questioned about our methods when these methods have successfully neutralized a threat that the Concorde security apparatus has been unable to eliminate for almost 2 decades. One would almost think that some individuals in Concorde were willing to allow this criminal organization to continue operating. This is a shocking assumption," and the scales of the representative of Adia flashed with anger. Dax glanced at his tablet. "As our investigation revealed financial transactions from accounts linked to the personal funds of 3 council members to shell companies linked to the criminal leadership. We plan to resolve this issue through confidential diplomatic channels, but since we are so straightforward today..." The room exploded with a cacophony of voices and electromagnetic radiation. The Octurian mediator activated his harmonic resonator, sending a wave of soothing vibrations through the room. "Colleagues, this confrontational approach is pointless. Perhaps we can focus on finding constructive solutions." Dax, smoothly shifting back to his diplomatic persona. "Terra has prepared a detailed report on the criminal organization, including all evidence of official involvement. Of course, we are ready to share this information with an independent investigative body. The threat was implicit. If you put pressure on us, we will expose all those involved." Killian's representative, whose species processes information faster than most organic beings, quickly clicked on his native language before the translation matrix translated it into standard. "The ambassador's proposal seems reasonable, but it does not solve the committee's main problem regarding humanity's self-representation in Concorde." "Are you referring to the fact that we didn't declare ourselves a threat when we joined?" Dax laughed, a sound that some species found extremely disturbing in the current context. "Are any of you?" When entering a new environment populated by established predators, only a fool would declare himself a threat. A Dorsan representative said that, "I am a cautious person who relies on DAX, as I do when established systems fail, and who puts results ahead of appearances. These are earthly qualities that serve us well, and they have served Concorde well." 3 days ago, he stood up, ignoring protocol, and began to pace slowly in front of the committee. "You're afraid because you just realized that you don't understand us. You have formed assumptions about humanity based on our technological progress, our lack of diplomatic experience, and our apparent desire to please. You classified us and brushed us off, no longer paying attention." His voice remained calm, but there was a power in it that demanded attention. "That was your mistake. On Terra, those who stop paying attention to Earthlings are dying out." The silence that followed the exchange was profound. Even the Erewhon mediator seemed speechless. Finally, the oldest member of the committee, a Thuranian whose age had been measured for centuries, spoke in the slow, deliberate manner of his kind. "Ambassador, are you threatening us?" Dax stopped pacing and smiled, a sincere expression that somehow turned out to be more frightening than any show of aggression. "Not at all. I invite you to understand us better. Earthlings don't want conflicts. We're actually quite cooperative by nature, but we're also survivors. We prepare for the worst-case scenarios and act decisively when we are threatened. Yes, when necessary, we hunt." He returned to his seat with an easy grace. "The question is not whether Earthlings are predators disguised as diplomats. The question is whether Concorde wants us to be allies or adversaries." The weeks following the confrontation with the executive committee were marked by a marked shift in galactic politics. Earthlings, having demonstrated their predatory nature, could expect isolation or hostility. However, they were met by something much more valuable in interstellar relations. With a healthy degree of caution, the celebration of the Galerian 500th anniversary, the event that caused the initial diplomatic incident, went according to plan, albeit with some notable adjustments. The Earth delegation was no longer confined to Sector 9, but was placed in a prominent position next to the central exhibit. The representatives of Adia, who so vehemently objected to the presence of Earthlings, now seemed to find their presence not only acceptable, but even desirable. How quickly perceptions change! "Isn't it fascinating?" Deputy Secretary Klepp remarked to Supreme Counselor Zarn as they watched Ambassador Dax, who was having a friendly conversation with a group of previously suspended delegates. One moment they were diplomatic novices, the next they were being courted as allies. "Fear is a powerful force," the stimulator replied. "The crystal formations of Zyal refract light in an intriguing way, making me wonder if they understand the surprise that their sudden friendliness causes Earthlings. I suspect that they are counting on this reaction." The gelatinous creature trembled with what could have been amusement or worry. Non-gelatin species often found it difficult to distinguish the difference. They revealed just enough to make everyone reassess their views without revealing their full capabilities. A calculated revelation then occurred all over the Great Hall. Ambassador Dax participated in what appeared to be a friendly conversation with High Marshal Valtar. To an outsider, it was a picture of diplomatic cordiality. For those who have a deeper understanding of interspecific dynamics, it was a master class in subtle dominance assertion. "Your security teams acted admirably during the incident," the High Marshal said, bowing his head in an even gesture of recognition. "Such precision in boarding operations is rare." Dax replied with practiced modesty, "That's too kind. Our Rangers undergo rigorous training for various situations, and you never know when such skills may be needed in our dangerous galaxy." The emphasis on "our dangerous galaxy" was subtle but unmistakable. It was the verbal equivalent of a careless hand position next to a weapon, not a threat but a reminder. "Indeed," the Marshal agreed. "The feathers are slightly raised, which Earthlings have learned to recognize as nervous tension. Dominion Val always appreciates preparation. Perhaps our forces could benefit from joint exercises in the future. What a wonderful suggestion! Dax smiled, showing just enough teeth to remind the Avans of who the Earthlings came from. I will ask my military attaché to contact your office to arrange the details. In the far corner of the reception hall, a young Earth diplomat was explaining Earth idioms to a group of fascinated multi-species attachés. So when we talk about someone as a wolf in sheep's clothing, we mean a dangerous person who hides his true nature behind a facade of innocence. She explained, sipping from a glass that seemed to contain wine, but was actually an alcohol-free substitute. In the early stages of their diplomatic career, Earthlings realized the importance of maintaining mental clarity in interspecific interactions. Your species, which is represented by a sheep in this metaphor? Asked Quillian's representative. The Earthman's laughter made several nearby creatures jump slightly. In the past, Earthlings were indeed wolves in many ecosystems, where they were top predators who developed tools and eventually developed diplomacy. However, you're talking about wolves as separate from themselves. The Methuselah observer noticed the Earth cultural compartmentalization, and the Earthman responded with a shrug. We tend to forget our predatory nature until circumstances remind us of it. The revelation that Earthlings could consciously switch between diplomatic and predatory modes of operation caused a wave of concern in the audience. This confirmed what many were just beginning to suspect. The Earthlings were not sheep in wolf's clothing, but wolves who could learn to act as diplomatic partners when it was beneficial to them. However, the most significant transformation was evident in Concorde's administrative operations. Investigations of the criminal organization uncovered by Earthlings have revealed widespread corruption that has spread to the highest echelons of several governments. 3 council members were forced to resign, and the Directorate of Security underwent a complete overhaul of its procedures. Throughout all this, the Earthlings offered their help, experience, and resources with unfailing courtesy. 6 months after the incident, Ambassador Dax found himself in a private meeting with the newly appointed Supreme Advisor, Tan. It was the first time I saw him truly vulnerable. I understand your concerns, Elder. Concorde has always been a beacon of stability and security for all beings, including Earthlings. Indeed, the ancient eyes of the Tang studied the Earthling with the patience of a being who has seen how civilizations arise and collapse. However, I can't help but wonder what humanity gets out of all this. You have shown yourself to be more dangerous than previously thought, but you continue to operate within our diplomatic structures. Why not just use your advantages to secure more power? Dax's expression softened, becoming sincere. Perhaps for the first time I saw him truly vulnerable. I understand your concerns. In a moment of insecurity, he spoke in an official capacity. He knew it wouldn't last forever, but Earthlings think long-term. We could seize resources, territories, or influence by force or manipulation. However, this causes resistance and resentment. By working inside the system, even if we demonstrate that we can act outside it if necessary, we can build something more valuable, a community where our children can thrive. Your appearance is surprisingly contradictory. We see Thoran predators who prefer peace, warriors who value diplomacy, and strategists who seek cooperation rather than dominance. That's the whole point of humanity, Dax agreed with a slight smile. We are preparing for the worst, striving for the best. We keep our fangs and claws by holding out our open arms. We never forget where we came from, even striving to become something better.